Derby Day delight for the Gunners, whilst more humiliation is heaped on Frank's misfiring Spurs. Welcome back to the GCFC pod. After a few months of no videos, we are here to hopefully revamp the podcast. Today's episode will be a review of yesterday's North London derby. First of all, Marcus and Leo, reactions to the result, you must be buzzing.
Yeah, I think it was a great result. Obviously, it doesn't matter what the scoreline is in the derby as you win, but it doesn't really get much sweeter than that. 4-1. I can't remember the last time we thrashed them like that. We have been beating them a lot over the last couple of seasons, but a 4-1 win, yeah, very good, very good.
And Leo?
I'm ecstatic. I don't know. It's not really. I don't think, like Mark said, there's not really much more you can actually ask for in performance like that. To come away from the game and think that we probably could have scored like 3 or 4 more. I mean, pretty much speaks volumes about like the skill gap between the two teams in the game. I'll save some other thoughts for later on, but yeah, really, really buzzing with all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot to get through. You were speaking on the gap between the two sides. Jake, was this a predictable result or not in your eyes?
Yeah, well, what I will say is that I think the result was extremely predictable, but the scoreline wasn't. So as much as, we like to poke fun at Arsenal for being boring, the open play, XG, stuff like that, they were, extremely good. Arteta got it exactly right. Frank got it exactly wrong. But yeah, I think it's one of those ones where the result was very predictable. I think the Spurs players know when you're a player, like I said in the chat yesterday, sometimes and I think they knew. So I think the fact that Spurs hadn't won at the Emirates since November 2010, 15 years in the Premier League, that is. Chelsea last week a couple of weeks ago against Chelsea, Spurs registered like the lowest XG for Spurs on record, which is awful. And across their last 5 games, Arsenal's XG against is less than 0.5 in each game. So I think it's a predictable result, but don't take credit. I don't want to take credit away from how good Arsenal were.
Absolutely. We'll get on to how good Arsenal were. Let's kickstart the episode. So the opening half hour saw Spurs look pretty defensively compact. However, a beautifully lobbed ball by Marino into Trossard, followed by a deflection that took it past Vicario and opened the scoring for the Gunners. Marcus and Leo, how do you see Trossard's future going at Arsenal? Because from a Spurs perspective, he always seems to score a goal against us. But with all the young talent coming through, plus any rumoured signings, for example, Semenyo has been kind of floating around Arsenal recently. Now it looks like he's maybe on his way to Liverpool. Does he stay much longer than this year, or do you think you sell him on for maybe some value?
I think Trossard just somehow continues to prove people wrong over and over again. I don't know what it is, but obviously he just seems to have the knack for scoring goals when it matters. Obviously, if you look back in the summer, there was rumours of around 25 million bid from a Saudi club to get him back, or to get him to leave even. A lot of fans are quite happy for that to go, especially with Hassan and Reze, but I mean, myself included, to be fair, but I think it's hard as well because obviously you look at his age, he's I think turning 30 next year, which isn't ridiculous. I think it's hard for players to kind of escape that assumption that once you hit 30 now that you kind of on the decline. You look at players like Kane, for example, probably playing some of the best football of his career, and he's 34. I think he's got a future. Whether or not he's a starter is a different question, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like we'd be harsh to let him go because he's in such a short space done so much. It's mental.
Yeah, and I don't want to sort of speak for Arsenal fans, so I'm not one myself, but I think he's one of those players where you're not going to, because he's getting on and not necessarily flashy, you didn't sign him for that much, you're probably not going to get that value unless it's Saudi. I imagine he isn't on the most wages. So I think he's probably one of those players where you'd want to keep around if he can continue to be kind of effective for the next few years off the bench. I know it's cliche, but around the training ground and whatnot, I think he's the type of player you'd want to keep. He'll have that experience. He's played in the Prem for a long time, and like I said, if he can just keep producing when it matters, he's definitely one as an Arsenal fan, I'd want to keep.
I think he's just the pure definition of a impact player. He's kind of come to come to terms, not come to terms, but like a lot of people refer to him as like that player off the bench that will come on and score a goal. You look at, say, for Bayern in the quarterfinals a couple of years ago, came
Yeah.
on,
And
equalised.
yeah, and he did really well for the game I was at last year. He pestered Marquinhos, won the ball, and I think it might have been the chance where Saka missed, but just in that Champions League semi-final, he's still managing to win the ball back in the opposition half and create huge chances. So I think that's invaluable and probably not worth selling for what you'd get.
No, yeah, no, we're never going to get upwards of 30 mil from now, and I don't think there's any point in selling them because unless you're going to profit, unless you're going to sell for some profit, and realistically, it'd be unfortunate to see him leave on the free, I think. But I think in terms of value for what, like, I think it was 27 million. That's pretty, you got your money's worth, more or less.
I think we should definitely keep him because you look in the team this season so far, on the wing we've been quite unlucky with injuries and he's been there to fill out the gap constantly. He doesn't seem to get injured too much, but now saying that, I probably just jinxed it. But he's a very reliable player, and I think I've seen a stat, I don't know if it's true, that in 2025 he's got the most goals and assists for us, which I don't think, when looking at him and looking at the rest of the players in our team, you wouldn't think that he's the player with the most goals and assists, but he just continues to prove people wrong. Loads of Arsenal fans had their doubts about him. I'm probably one of them included. But like you said, with his age and that, I don't really think you're going to benefit getting a cheap sale off him. I think the experience he has and that age, whilst you still got not young players in the Arsenal squad, but a lot younger players than him, they could definitely benefit with having him around the team for a bit longer. And even if his role just does drop to being a bench player every time, it's an amazing bench player to have. And I think we should definitely keep him. I don't think there's any need to get rid of him.
I think with you saying he's got the most like GA for the squad this year, it just goes to show that yet again, like how important availability is, because he seems to just kind of never get injured. I don't want to jinx it, but you look at like our attacking injury. I think literally all of our attackers have had injuries within the past year, and albeit like long term as well. And he just seamlessly steps up every single time. There's some games he does become ineffective, but that's football, isn't it? So I think, yeah, like Kyle, like you said, I think it's, well, not like you said, but I think it's definitely important to keep him for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. And like you said about that, there not being much point of kind of selling him on, because you wouldn't get too much for him. And I think that experience is probably more valuable than the actual fee that you'd get in itself for him. So I completely agree. Moving on 5 minutes later, and Eze doubled the host's lead after dancing his way into the box and rifling his effort into the bottom corner. Boys, I'm going to leave the floor open for all of you to jump in. There was an argument to say that the goal should have been ruled out for offside. Do you think that was the case, and why?
Look, I think every year it seems like we have a new talking point based on the interpretation of the laws. I remember when it was VAR, first of all, it was handball. That then came back. Is it intentional? Can it ricochet? All this stuff. And then there's offsides. Where's the line drawn from? And I think there's been 3 incidents in the last few game weeks where there's been a goal given or not given with players blocking the view. I thought it was going to get disallowed, and that's not saying I agree with the laws of the game, but I just think the fact that I've seen one get given and one not get given. I think there was a Robertson one or something. I just think they need to try and just make it clearer. It's either all going to get given or not get given, because you can't deny the fact that they would have had an effect on Vicario. Does that mean he would have saved it? That's just, again, up for us to debate. Do we think that should be part of the law? Do we think the referee should check the VAR monitor and think, is how much is impeding? And personally, I think that it should be, if your player's offside, they should effectively be invisible. And if they were replaced with an invisible mannequin, would this situation be the same? And I think that's how they should try and look at it. So I'm surprised To be fair, I'm not surprised because obviously things always go either way. It's never really that consistent. I thought they might rule it out, but luckily, I guess for both teams, it didn't end up mattering. But yeah, personally, I thought they were going to rule it out, but I'm not surprised that they didn't.
I don't. It's hard because I'd rather see, like you said, just some consistency within officiating, because it always seems like I don't get how we get to the stage where by the letter of the law it's so interpretable. It's either you do this, you get penalised for doing this. So
it's
but
literally been
then
3
if you
times
do
in 3
this, and
weeks.
because you've not done this in this situation, then it's not this. So it doesn't really add up as much. Like, you know, if it got ruled out, it got ruled out. That's football. But like if it got ruled out and say like next week same thing happened, and then you know, they get a goal. It's like say with the the kicking the ball away last season when Rice got sent off for it, and a few other people on our team think it as well. But you see it across the league all the time that players do it, but then for some reason, I'm not saying like, oh, it's Arsenal, like they're getting picked on for it, but like, why is it always in these like certain times that this doesn't get penalised, but then when it does, this is penalised? You know what I mean? It's just it's another problem for
like I
EFL.
said, I think at the end of this season, when they do a review on the laws of the game, or however often they do it, that's something that the clubs are going to bring up, especially the aggrieved ones. And I think that's the next thing they're going to have to clarify. Whether they get it right or wrong, probably not. But I think it's definitely going to be something to look out for in terms of changes. Either they're all going to get given or they're all not. As long as it's the same for all teams, I'm not too bothered. We'll have to see what happens.
I think it's interesting though. Sorry, because I remember I saw a stat. I think couple seasons ago. It was points. If like basic decisions were given the right how they should be interpreted by the law. I think Wolves lost out on like 12, 13 points because of like incompetent refereeing, which is mental in the scheme of things. Like you think about how they'd be like 11th or something like that. If that was the case, obviously it's different over a 30-day game period, but it just goes to show, like, I mean, fortunately for us, I say fortunately, but the game was already done almost, wasn't it? If it was a tight, you'd probably hear a lot more about it. But it's just, I don't get how officials get it so wrong.
Yeah, but at the same time, we've all basically agreed here that the game was so one-sided that it didn't end up mattering. But I think that's probably the wrong way of looking at it, because we're essentially giving the referee, the VAR in that situation, the FA, whoever, we're basically giving them a get out of jail free card because it didn't matter. But then that's just kicking the can down the road. Do you know what I mean? The next time when it happens, when it does matter, we could have solved this in the past. But like we said, there's something like this every year. That's just the latest one. Part of the game, innit?
When I first seen the goal happen, I thought that it was fine. I didn't think that was a problem. And when you look at the replay from the behind angle, I know different angles can show different sides of the coin and all that, but the behind angle does look bad because you think it might not have impacted Vicario that much, but it makes him be a bit slower in reacting because you got, don't know if it's three, I know it's at least 2 Arsenal players in an offside position, and you're just thinking, I think that shouldn't be allowed, because then you see it happen against Liverpool. Was it? Yeah, it was against Liverpool twice, I think. One time for Van Dijk, which I don't know how.
Yeah, that was it.
Like, I don't know how that was disallowed. That was really bad. And that's obviously a massive point in the game. Just before half time, they could have, I think, equalised it. And then obviously they went on to lose the game. And then it happened, I think it happened against them again, I want to say, the next week or a similar game week, and got given. So it's just the inconsistency. Like, I'm all for saying that, that goal can stand, but then why is the Van Dijk one not standing 2-3 weeks back? You know what I mean?
It puts a lot of pressure on the referee as well, because players are going to see this and they're going to recognise this is a game where we might be able to win the ref over by, I know it sounds stupid, but like moaning, intimidation, if you want to call it that. This is an area where they're going to see it's exploitable, and we know Premier League players will do anything they can to. So I'm surprised Vicario didn't probably moan more. I think I saw Donnarumma the other day come out of his goal, get booked for shouting at the ref, but like Vicario wasn't on the same level of anger. But I think those teams, if it's at home, if the fans are behind it, if the players are really in the referee's face and the referee doesn't have a clear instruction on what to do, it is a situation where you could potentially gain an edge from the referee, which is obviously we all agree shouldn't be, it's not good for the game,
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you made a really good point about Vicario not making a big enough kind of complaint about it. The first thing that I noticed, and I think what's his name? Rory Talks Football. He posted something quite similar, actually, basically saying that he knew that it probably would stand because instead of complaining about it being offside, Vicario just seemed to kind of bollock his defenders for letting Eze get into that position in the first place. Me personally, I didn't think it should have been disallowed. I think it should have stood. If anything, I thought that maybe Vicario could have done better. It just looked like he had he got a hand to it. Like he actually got to it. It was just a really weak hand to it. To be honest, I think he should have done a lot better.
Sorry, you meant just a point about like the whole complaining to the referee. I think the fact that you have to go ahead and literally like say like, oh, like look, like he's done this, he's done that, is just rubbish anyway. Like I don't agree with any of that. I don't see how
it's obviously not cricket.
Officials miss things. I get it, but like I think this comes down to the use of VAR. VAR's misused in terms of that it's only applicable, like you can only use it in certain situations. Whereas like you say for like TMO and rugby is really well used because they can jump in at any time and be like, oh, look at this, that they've done this. Whereas VAR, it's like, oh, if it's only like basically call for review, which is just, I think, that's a whole other debate, but it's another thing I don't agree with in terms of one, the use of it, and two, having a go at the ref, which I guess, is part of the game almost, but at the same time, I don't really think I don't think you should be allowed to like shout at him to get him to look at something also.
Definitely not. And they did try to crack down on that by introducing, you get a yellow card if you call for a booking, which I'm sure still doesn't always get officiated properly. And obviously intimidation is a natural part of being a human and being in a position of power or not. But we can't let the game get to a stage where being more intimidating, getting in the ref's face ball gets you rewarded. So I think, luckily we all agree on that, and hopefully steps are made in order to make that so there's more clarity and situations like this don't happen.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree. We will move on just because we could make an entire video just based around VAR. And to be honest, it's actually maybe something we could look into in the future because it just seems to cause so much controversy every single week. There's always a new talking point around VAR or a refereeing decision where it did or didn't go to VAR. But half-time concluded 2-0 to the Gunners, and it took just 50 seconds after the break into the second half for Eze to earn his brace with another brilliant effort that was unsavable. However, a 35-yard lob by Richarlison looks like a possible route back into the game for Spurs. Jake, I'm going to come to you. Talk to us about why you think chances like that was the only real chance we got against Arsenal. We just looked like we could not get anywhere near their defensive third, let alone their goal.
Definitely. So I think first and foremost, we've got to say Arsenal were in general, incredibly well drilled defensively. They set up obviously in the other team's half, but they defend. They've got great centre halves. Their fullbacks are very versatile. So first of all, it's always going to be a struggle to play against Arsenal, no matter who you are. We saw Spurs and Frank go with a 3-back, 5-back, whatever you want to call it. And I think he's thinking behind this is he was a bit scared of set pieces and stuff. And he just thought, okay, who am I going to bring in? Who's our best set piece defender? Because, Vicario isn't always great. Van der Ven ain't great. Danso. So he brings him in. And I think Frank then goes, all right, I'm going to want to bring Danso in, but I see Romero and Van der Ven as undroppable. So I'm going to have to go to a 5, which he did against PSG. And I think the PSG game was a bit more aggressive. And it was a bit more to dare to do. I think yesterday was quite cowardly and timid. But I think my first point is, this might be a hot take. I don't think Van der Ven is undroppable. So obviously, I'm sure he has his reasons on why he wanted to go with the 3. I'm guessing it was because he assumed, Marino's going to drop in. He wants one of the centre halves to be able to follow Marino without them being scared of leaving a massive gap. It didn't turn out like that, so there was no point anyway. But like I said, I don't think Van der Ven's undroppable. I think he's obviously a great. He's kind of like a flashy centre half. He's aesthetically good in multiple ways, but I think he isn't at the level where people actually think he's at, especially Spurs fans. So I don't think he's undroppable. So I think, in hindsight, and it was a great thing, he could have just gone with a 4-back with the same fullbacks and Danso and Romero. But yeah, I think that kind of set the tone, especially with the midfield pivot. Arsenal fans, we were at the pub or whatever, and they said, "Look, this is food." You know what I mean? This is this is so defensive. The wing backs ended up getting pinned back, so it was essentially the 5-4-1 or the 5-3-2. It kind of Kudus wasn't really defending that much. I just think it set a precedent of we're scared, and I think this is why Frank's going down the route of becoming just as polarizing as Ange, but like at the opposite end of the spectrum. Ange was more like, screw this, we're going to do our thing. If it works, it works. And people obviously had a go at him for not being necessarily proactive. And Frank's at the other end. I think in the game against PSG, the game against Arsenal, we'll see what he does this week. He's basically, it shows that you're scared. I think if you are Arteta, if you're an Arsenal player, and when you get the lineup, you see it in the changing room, you're thinking, look, they're scared. They're not going to hit us massively on the counter. Their midfield isn't going to dribble or pass out of a situation. So I think it just set the precedent. Whilst I don't think that the players are necessarily all bad, I just think with that midfield duo, 3 centre halves and the wing back, pin back, it's always going to be really difficult. And, I could probably make an hour-long video picking apart different things from certain players in certain position, but I won't bore all you guys. So I think, just to conclude, it was just, a bit of a cowardly setup. And I think Arsenal definitely smelt blood and saw it in the game.
What are you like kind of 3 key takeaways from that lineup, pretty much? Like, obviously you mentioned Danso, his importance and how his selection has kind of influenced what else has happened.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
Obviously you mentioned Van der Ven, but what else do you reckon kind of went wrong in Frank's process?
I think a big thing is the Palhinha-Bentancur. I know Palhinha has a lot of haters, because if you want to replicate what elite European clubs do, none of them have like that type of destroyer, and I see that point a lot. And I'm not saying it's invalid. I don't really understand the appeal of Bentancur repeatedly. Every Spurs fan will say he's not been the same since the bent his ACL. I don't know why he didn't go. Salah had a great start to the season. I don't know why he didn't put him in. He's more mobile. He follows around. He get forward a little bit more. So yeah, I think that midfield pivot was destined for failure, especially when the centre backs weren't following Marino properly, because Arsenal's attack was very fluid in a way that Marino was pulling out wide.
It almost just didn't make sense, because you kind of felt like you had that 3-back, you have the wing backs obviously out wide, and then your midfield. So you have Bentancur and Palhinha, but then they commit out wide, which just
that was it.
There was so much space in the middle. I just quite understand what they were thinking, especially when you played, which is why Eze benefited so much. You play against a low block.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I don't know if we were going to mention this later on, Kyle, but you play against a low block. That's Eze's food, literally. You see the spaces. You got all 3 goals in the same position. How you and he's nearly scored a 4th in the same position again. How do you let him do that on and on again and again?
Yeah, and that's what I don't understand, because I've got, obviously, when I was making notes earlier, looking through it, I've got screenshots here of the situation before the shot, and the first 3 goals all came from Spurs' left-hand side, your right side. The first one, I think Palhinha must have been instructed. I know Saka gets this a lot. Udogi's on Saka, and Palhinha rushes over to double team him. Yeah. Odegaard, I'm not sure why he played them. I think that'd be my 3rd point. I know there's struggle for injuries, but he's supposed to be this kind of touchline wing and take on guy, and he's playing him inside a bit more centrally. I'll just play Tell. You know what I mean? I think Odegaard didn't really seem to know what he was doing. He kind of looked like he was caught between 2 minds defensively. But anyway, Palhinha comes over to double team Saka. Udogi, Saka sucks them in, and plays it to Eze, edge of the D, scores. Yeah, and And like you said, 2 other cases, both came from the right side, both came from Polinia or Bentancur overcommitting, and Eze is in the middle in so much space. And this is the situation where I think Frank conceptually thinks, okay, we've got 3 centre halves, one of them can step out. This just didn't happen. So I just don't understand why you wouldn't identify this at half time and go, do you know what? I know you did change to a back 4, but it just didn't seem to work as well, because you've just got to say to Polinia, look, I know you want to be aggressive. I know you're a bit of a rock. Just stay central. They're finding so much success. Like you said, Eze loves that position, and he showed it. So I don't understand the process of not having that player just hold that space, cover the space. Just don't let him operate in that area. 3 goals, and like you said, a massive missed chance from that same area. It's just, if that happened with my like 18s, it would be annoying. And this is a Premier League derby, so it's just, yeah. Whether it's the players, I think it's probably more what he's instructed them to do, but it's awful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna quickly ask Marcus. So I made a point on Twitter yesterday about how a lot of the top teams, they kind of have a player that has came through the ranks and has established himself within the starting 11. Obviously, with Arsenal, there's Bukayo Saka. Foden with Man City, obviously, last couple of years, he's maybe not been as good as what he was when he was breaking through. But this year, you could maybe say that he's starting to perform a little bit better. How important do you think it is to have a player who kind of understands the impact of, like, the kind of the importance, of a derby like that? Because I think one of the issues at Tottenham is that since Kane's left, and now Son, who, didn't come through the academy, but he was here a really long time. He was the captain. In my opinion, we now don't really have a player who kind of fully understands just like how fierce the rivalry is. I just want your opinion on how important it is to have players like Saka, or even players who have maybe grown up as Arsenal fans in Eze as well, because they'd understand it a bit more. Just wanted your thoughts on it.
I think, like, from a fan's point of view, when you see players coming through the ranks through Arsenal, or having been Arsenal fans growing up and then eventually joined us, when you see them on the pitch and they're celebrating, there was like a clip after the game where Saka was like really giddy, shouting all that after the tunnel, and there's stuff like that where it shows, like, I don't want to say like that it means more of him, but like these players are like really up for it. Like, if there's a battle and we're not doing well, obviously we're seen as the superior team to Tottenham before the game. But let's say if we're not, if these players, if we let's say lose that game yesterday, you can look at players like Saka, maybe Eze, and you can say, well, we might not have won, but they've gave it their hardest. They're going to be running their socks off. They're not going to be players who you look after the game and think, well, he was walking. Why was he walking? We're getting all run over the pitch. And players like that, they're quite unique, really. Like, I feel like Saka could be that player who stays at Arsenal for ages. Obviously, trophies and that need to come with that, because a player of his quality, other teams are going to come knocking on the door. And to get another one in Eze, you could even say, I know Miles Lewis-Skelly hasn't really had any minutes this season, but, you know, Calafiori isn't necessarily the most like steadiest of players when it comes to his history with staying fit. So just having those players around the club, it helps instill that mentality that, you know, we are all one, and that the fans can look at them and think, those are our players. They want it just as much as us. And you could see that yesterday in the celebrations, whether that was their posts or the videos in the tunnel after the game. And it always brings a smile to us fans when we can see that, like, relatability, basically. Yeah.
I think it's what Spurs lack is culture. They got absolutely none of it. There's not one player in that team that I look at and I'm like, he loves Spurs. He wants Spurs. Bar maybe like Maddison, but that's even that's like a long Spurs. Huh?
Richie, but
Richie,
even then, you know what I mean?
He gives it, but he's also just a bit like, if he could go elsewhere, he probably would. Do you know what I mean? In say Barca came knocking, he'd go the next day, realistically.
It's a massive mentality thing, yeah.
But it just kind of, you know, like, kind of feels like we all said it like after the game, which is like none of the Spurs players wanted to be on that pitch. Absolutely none of them. It was, and that, like you said, Carl, that comes down to the importance of that you need to show how much you care. Like this, that should be like the biggest game of the season for them, probably. I'd argue. Going to the Emirates, like, look, we haven't won it in 15 years. Now's the chance to do so, change it. But like we said, we pointed out certain things, but I think that how they lined up and all that, but there was absolutely no fight, no nothing. It was just a complete loser, stinker mentality, all of it. And I don't know. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of like bringing back. I don't know what it is to be Spurs, but like right now, like I'm sure Marcus agreed. Like I love being an Arsenal fan. I think it's like what I mean. Like the fact, like obviously, no, we don't really go to games and whatnot, but you kind of feel like the players want to play for you. You look at it, you're like, oh shit, like yeah, go on. You're proper like happy to play for their club, but you see a lot of Spurs fans always complaining about like, oh, he's doing this. It's one problem after another, and I think that's just probably the main thing. I think out of everything, that probably needs tweaking in order to get results like we did yesterday. Like you seen, like maybe 2-3 years ago when we lost like 3-0 at your place. That kind of like tides almost switched. But yeah, I think that's what I've got to that.
Yeah, I'll just go back to it. Like I said, it's a huge mentality thing, and not only culturally, because that's over the course of decades at a club, just in the build up to the game and on the match day. Like I said, the Spurs players, they're gonna obviously they have incredible self belief. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a pro footballer. But they'll know who their teammates are. They can rely on. They know who their teammates who are good, who are gonna fight on the pitch, and just in terms of what level their teammates are at, they're going to know which players are at what level, what they can offer, what they can't offer, because they're around each other all the time. Like I said, I think as a Spurs player, you look at that lineup. Frank's probably is quite a bit more soft spoken. You've just kind of been set up for failure, and even of course I don't want to keep going back to him, but Ange had his flaws, but I think he was obviously a great speaker, because he got some great results and hard fought results. The players at the beginning were massively playing for him. They're gonna in that situation, they'll go to the Emirates, they'll know what the squad's going to be, and they think, do you know what? We might be the underdogs. We might be going to the Emirates here, but we're gonna give it a go, and we're gonna attack. We're not gonna give up our system. We're gonna give it a go, and he'll obviously get them up for it in the changing room. And a lot of them are the same players. But I just think like I said, it's just a poor precedent to go for a back five, and he's obviously going to say, Udogie and Spence, they weren't that adventurous. They couldn't be because they were getting pinned back. As a let's say, I was Kudus, yeah. I see I've got Richarlison up front. I think, okay, yeah, he can score goals, but he's not going to offer that much. Spence, he's okay, but he's not going to do too much. He's going to be a bit more defensive. And then I look alongside me and I've got Polinia and Bentancur. And as Kudus, he's probably thinking, I know he's a professional. He's thinking, I'm an unbelievable player, but what am I working with here? And if multiple players think that, I think they did think that. And like you said, it manifested itself on the pitch with lack of belief, timidity. And yeah, I guess it stems from the way Frank set them up and also the fact Arsenal are very imposing side right now. So don't take credit from them either.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you spoke about how obviously a lot of the players during Ange's tenure, there were some good results, there were some bad results, but it was clear to see that the players absolutely loved him. The behind the scene, footage coverage of like his team talks. He was a real good motivator, and that was like his key strength. Before I move on, I saw an article from Matt Law earlier, basically saying that there's a few players at the club already that are still behind Frank, but they believe that instead of focusing on the opposition's weaknesses and things like that, they think that there should be more of an emphasis on focusing on their strengths, as opposed to focusing on the opposition. So it's like, our cracks already beginning to show, like players maybe disagreeing. We saw the thing we saw with Spence and Van der Ven a few weeks ago, where they looked to have kind of like aired him a little bit as they're going off the pitch. That was clear.
That's terrible, by the way. That's not on. That's absolutely not on.
But
It
Kyle, I
didn't-
totally agree, because it's just, you know, in anything in life, and of course this is like an elite sports level, there's a difference between reactive and proactive, and you just want to be proactive, and that is, you know, thinking about your strengths. What are we going to do? How we go? And players are going to enjoy what they're good at. You know what I mean? Eze had an absolute field day because Arteta said to him, you know what, we're gonna try and get you plenty of space in the 10. You know, Mikel Marino is gonna you know, be very he's not going to be confined to a space. He's not going to take up your space. He's going to go wherever. He's going to generate you space, and we're going to look for you in there, and you're going to get chances. And you can see, because he's just played to his strengths, and it's worked completely. And I think you like you said, you've just got to try and play to your strengths. Of course, there are going to be some weaknesses here and there, but the players are going to enjoy it. They're going to back you more. They're going to be a bit more up for it, rather than trying to exploit one of Arsenal's very few weaknesses, which just didn't happen, because, you know, it's a very difficult job. But
absolutely. With 15 minutes to go, Arsenal dealt the final blow through Eze once again, earning himself a hat-trick with yet again another brilliant effort on goal. Marcus and Leo, I'll start with you first, Marcus. If you had to bet on it now, have Arsenal done enough to maybe win the league by producing a gap too big for other teams to catch up? And if not, when do you think is maybe the appropriate time to say it's our title to lose now? Is that next weekend against Chelsea?
I think after that result, we're 6 clear of Chelsea, 7 clear of City. I think Liverpool out of the picture now, so it's just the two I said at the start. You know, I think next week we beat Chelsea, we're 9 clear of them. I still think even at 6 points clear now, we should comfortably finish. I'm not saying like loads of points ahead of Chelsea, but we should beat Chelsea, because you look at, I still don't trust their back line enough, Chelsea, to be winning a Premier League title. And then it's Man City, and you look at their upcoming fixtures, they've got some more favourable, whilst we've got some kind of tricky ones. I mean, we're 12 game weeks in. I can't say, you know, we're definitely going to win it now, but I mean, it's looking very good. And each game week which passes, bear in mind, we've still got a lot of injuries out, like that lineup against Spurs. We're still missing like Gyökeres, Martinelli. I think Havertz would have done really well in a game like yesterday. We're still waiting for these sort of players to come back in. Obviously, we are clearly the favourites, and I think the only reason why I'd say it probably is ours to lose is because of the depth. Like, we can get all these injuries, but the backups are very good. I think it is ours to lose. And obviously, if we do win next week at Stamford Bridge, I think that's a massive sign to the rest of the league that, you know, it's looking not over, but because, you know, game week 13 that would be, but it's looking very good.
What I hate over the last 3 years is that there's almost been this narrative that we're, you know, at fault for losing the league. Obviously, that first season, 22-23, that was, you know, that's ridiculous. You can point to many things. That's a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But the other 2 years, you know, you're up against a City team that won 17 out of 18 games. What can you do about that? You know, we won 16 out of 18. Any other season, you'd have won the league like that. Last season, yeah, it is what it is. Everyone's a bit crap, really. But I think, you know, this season is now kind of like, you know, we're pretty good at football. But and I think it almost is true that, like, we would be the bottlers in this case. Like, what was I going to say? But that's a brain fart.
it's so true. Like Marcus said, with the depth, a lot of the time, people's club's season gets derailed by injuries. Yeah, your entire first choice back line could be injured, and you'd still be able to line up with Lewis Skelly, Hincapié, Mosquera, and Ben White. And I think that's where the levels are, because that back four is better than people would think that back four is, like incredibly good. And I think you can go all over the pitch and injure a player, and their replacement isn't going to be, you know, worrying you too much. Even if Saka got injured, if I was an Arsenal fan and Saka got injured, I won't be worried. I know we've got plenty of people that can be versatile. You've probably got a bit more trust in Arteta now that he's going to fix a solution. Of course, you brought Madueke in as well. So I just think not injuries, unless you genuinely had like 15 first-team injuries, I don't think that can derail the season now. So I think it's down to the players, the manager, to not overthink things, stay locked in, as I think they will do.
I think for a while we've almost been our own worst enemy. This is what I was going to say. So yeah, I'd say that's been the fault of the last few seasons. We just somehow find a way to make it difficult for ourselves. But I think I look at this season, right, and every single game we played, one that we've lost, Anfield away, 1-0 free kick. Neither team was better. It was very like, I'm sure everyone agreed that was probably one of the worst matches of the season. It was very just like, oh, we kind of cancel each other out. Won the goal. What can you do? Sure, against City, again, that's Pep Guardiola. Not much you can do about that. You try your best. We beat him 5-1 last season. It's one of those games. And then the Sunderland game, 2 very football goals. I don't think you can explain it any more than that. Like at my end of, there was no robbery, sorry. Just flicked on, like semi over a kick. But but if you look at like every single other game, we just absolutely dominate teams, absolutely just penetrating back to front. Excuse me. But but I don't think I've seen last point. I don't think I've seen that quite as much, like you said earlier, just almost so well drilled, but also so fluid at the same time. The fact that it's so structured, but I think Arteta's learned that you can plan a game out all you want. You can see how it plays out, but at some point you're gonna have to let things slide, almost let things go. But yeah, go on.
The only game where I think you've been outplayed, and I think that's a bit of a strong word, but the out of all the Arsenal games I've seen, the only one where you were worse was the first game of the season against Man United, and you still managed to come away with a win. And me and my dad always talk about this. That is what champions do. You remember when Liverpool won it in that like COVID season, and even when they came close the year before, the amount of juju they had just to get late goals, come back from 2 goals down after the 80th minute. Champion standard teams win games they shouldn't have, and I think that Man United game is the only time this season you've had to display it, and you have, which I think is a really positive sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. In my opinion, I do think that unfortunately Arsenal probably will win the league this year. I couldn't think of anything worse than that happening, but I think it is definitely a kind of scenario where people might have to brace themselves for it this year, because in all the other years I did kind of think like, there's another team that could stop them. There was always another team that could rise up and stop them. But this year, I think you are the only consistent team in the league. Sorry, all the other teams that are around the top. For example, I think Man City. I don't think it's ridiculous to say that when they play at their best, they are probably the best team in the league. However, they are just not consistent enough to perform at those standards. If they were like that every week, then I think they would still win it.
Yeah, but they'd win it with maximum points, wouldn't they? So it's like, well.
But before I come to you, Jake, I just want to get a few things off my chest about the current situation at Tottenham, because I haven't been able to speak too much. 3 points, I'll try and make them brief. First one I saw from Kish on Twitter, which I completely agree with and didn't actually think of at the time. He mentioned about our throw-ins now. They completely nullify any sort of attacks because we take bloody 1 minute, 2 minutes to actually set up. By the time that Danso's got up the pitch ready to take a long throw-in, it just completely nullifies the attack. It's boring. It lets the other team kind of settle and get ready and they expect it. They know what's coming. The other one is he's kind of went back on his words as what he said at the start of the season about, taking risks. In our pre-season games, there was a lot of emphasis on building out from the back. That kind of seems to have went out the window a bit. We don't really see much of Romero's kind of splitting passes, like midfield splitting passes anymore, which it's like you've got one of the best ball playing centre backs in the world and you're not using him to his strengths, which kind of links back to that article that Matt Law brought out with players saying that they think that Frank should play to player strengths rather than focusing on the opposition as much. And the final point is kind of the banishment of Pap Sarr in recent weeks. He started off so well at the start of the season, and we haven't really seen him too much since. I think as well, focusing on Bergvall playing in a 10 more as like a kind of focusing on his physicality and his duel winning as opposed to what his actual strength is, and that is his technical ability. He's an extremely talented player. He's young. He's a very rare type of player to kind of be that mature in midfield at a young age, and I think he should be developing. And instead, he's kind of the last couple of weeks. I know obviously with his concussion, he wasn't allowed to play, but he's just seeing the bench a lot more. Especially when you see it as the fact that he was our best player last season. He won was it players player he won last season? Or was it?
It was something like that. But yeah, he had a good year, and now the playing well doesn't seem to get you rewarded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of, Bentancur could have the worst game of his life and he'd be one of the first names on the sheet for Thomas Frank.
Yeah.
Palhinha, I kind of have a little bit more leeway with, because at least he does excel in something, and that being his kind of defensive attributes, his tackling, his interceptions, whereas Bentancur, I actually don't know what he's good at. Like, there's not something he excels at, really.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm glad you brought up those 3 points, because I think I've got something to say about most of them. Throw-ins, like I said, it's very tedious, and even Danso taking long throws in our own half or in Spurs' own half just to get it down the line, it's kind of just a bit anti-football. And like you said, it slows the game down so much. Opposition gets organised. Sometimes you just want to get the ball back into play and just play, which leads on to the second point, what he said about playing out from the back. And I do actually have on my notes here the comments about risk taking. I think he said not taking a risk is a risk in itself or something. Well, I guess he was risk taking yesterday because he didn't take any risks. But I think it doesn't. What I noticed from the goal kicks as well, we play it short and then go long, which doesn't really make sense in my head, because I understand he's attempting to draw the team out and then go over. But at the same time, teams aren't that stupid. And second of all, I said this to Frankie yesterday at the pub, and I watched James Alcott's show earlier, and he said this as well, so I was not going insane. Richarlison, he's aerially good when he's attacking the goal, but his hold up actually isn't good. He doesn't really get off the ground. I think he's quite often the defender's stronger than him. They'll get over him. He just tries to back in, and not even in like a clever Kane way. Like, it's just a bit of more of a brain dead way.
He got bullied yesterday. Put it like
so yeah. So like I said,
he got bullied.
If you're going to go short and then go long straight away, to first of all someone who can't hold it up, but second of all, it just doesn't give the rest of the team a chance to get close to that player. So even if Richarlison does well, who has the second ball going? So I think if you either commit to going short or you commit to going long. You say, look, this is our build-up structure. We're going to try and do this. If we go long, tell Vicario to call it. That means the centre halves can get up, because Van de Ven's best attribute is probably his recovery. And we were saying this as well yesterday. Saka isn't like amazingly fast. Trossard isn't fast, and Marino ain't fast. Like, it's scarily fast. If it was against Gyökeres, Martinelli, I'd understand, wanted to sit a bit deeper. But why not just try and be a bit more aggressive, play a high line? If they want to run in behind, fine. We're supposed to have these great fullbacks. Dogi, Spence, defensively brilliant apparently, and Van de Ven, who's got the best recovery pace in the world. And it's about playing to strengths. We're not even giving them a chance to use it. What's the point? So like I said, if you're going to go long, just support Richarlison, get Kudus and Odeberg close to him. Palhinha and Bentancur need to be in a place to win the second ball. There's no point in going long just for him to back in, because he's going to lose the duel every time. And what was your third point, Kyle? Was that the comments?
It was about the utilising Bergvall more as a dual-winning 10 as opposed to technical.
Yeah, I think I understand maybe he's just being conservative in a big game. He wants to play some experienced players, international experience, whatnot, and they all are. I just think as a young player, it just doesn't send a good sign. You know, Frank doesn't necessarily have the best reputation from Brentford fans because they didn't have an academy, so he's not been in a situation where he's had like a bunch of kids to deal with. We've got Archie Gray as well, basically forgotten. You know what I mean? And I just think it's not a good sign for the future of Tottenham trying to sign young players and say, sell the project and say, you're going to get time because, well, you're not, because Bentancur's going to play. So I think, you know, this game was under the microscope. It's, you know, Sunday night football. I think when there's a bit of more of a low key game, if Spurs have got like a Saturday 3 o'clock or a game against like a lower team, why not just try something different? Get Sarr, Bergvall, even Gray, not necessarily all at the same time. Xavi starting as well. Give them a chance. They need minutes to know what it's like to play in the Prem, to get better, to prove themselves. If there's a game not under the spotlight of the national and the international media, I'm begging Thomas Frank, please give them a chance. Please play Sarr, please play Bergvall, and please don't play him in the 10. Just play Xavi, Sarr, and Bergvall. It might get run over, but who cares? Let's just try something different because we're sick of seeing Bentancur.
Absolutely, and I think as well, Fulham at home at the weekend, I think should be a kind of a perfect platform to kind of like station our midfield in that way. You know, like you said, with either Bergvall, Gray, or Sarr. I mean, we saw a midfield three at the start of the season against Burnley. Obviously, I know it's Burnley and Fulham are an established Premier League side, but midfield three of Bergvall, Sarr, and Gray, and we won 3-0. It looked really good, and I think we've just kind of regressed in the midfield front. I will just quickly add as well, you said about Richarlison with his lack of kind of hold up play. We do kind of have to give Frank a little bit of benefit, like the tiniest benefit of the doubt, in that he's missing Kulusevski, who is an extremely physical player, Solanke, who performs well with his back facing the goal. He's good in his build-up play, and also Maddison. That's near 50 goal contributions last year that he is missing. So it is no wonder we are struggling a bit, because we're having to rely on Odegaard, Tell, who I think at many other kind of big six clubs, or kind of your clubs like Aston Villa's or Newcastle's, you would probably expect them to be coming off the bench, maybe playing in cup games, progressing nicely. And I think the current situation opens them up to a lot more hate and criticism, because a lot is being asked of them at such a young age. And at times, it can be unfair, but it's also the harsh reality of being a professional footballer in a professional environment. Results matter.
Is Tell fit?
I think he is. I'm sure he was on the bench.
Yeah, this is one of the things where I don't understand. I know he'll have his reasonings. He's thinking we want to defend in a 5-4-1. We'll have Odegaard out wide. But if you're setting up in that 3-4-2-1, and you want Kudus and Odegaard to get close to Richie to support him, why are you not playing Tau? Because of course I've given him plenty of stick and whatever, but he's got more chance of, first of all, being up for the game, because he's clearly passionate. He went and spoke to the fans last year when it wasn't going well, and he's determined to prove his worth because he's not in the squad and the Champions League squad, and he's just more of a player who probably operates closer, a better sort of more centrally compared to a touchline winger. So it's just, I know he'll have reasoning for all these decisions, but they're not always clear, and I think it frustrates fans a lot. And like I said, he's becoming very polarizing very quickly, which is never a good sign for a new gaffer.
Absolutely, I agree. Before I wrap things up, is there anything anyone would like to add from the game or next week's game against Chelsea, against Fulham, anything like that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll say one thing actually. Sorry, Leo. I think it was Eze's hat-trick goal. Timber is on the right-hand side. Of course, the DMs, or I think Palhinha committed to the left. We had Van de Ven over there, Palhinha over there, Udogie over there. Yeah. Timber cuts inside. He attempts to play a through ball, and Bentancur blocks it really feebly, and it goes back to Timber, who plays it inside, and Eze finishes. And I'm sure you guys have all seen the stat. This season, Spurs have attempted the least through balls, and I imagine it's still, because when I saw it, it was 4 in the whole season, and that was a couple of weeks ago.
It's probably still 4.
Yeah, exactly. And my point is, Timber was rewarded. He got lucky, but he made his own luck. He was rewarded for attempting that through ball, for trying that thing, for trying that pass. It came back to him, and he got an assist. And I think it's just, like I said, the motto of like to dare is to do. That moment when I saw it back, it kind of just encapsulates that there's no daring and there's no doing, and you get rewarded for daring, and you can make stuff happen. So yeah, I think that's just a little thing that was quite telling, that he got that stroke of luck from a failed through ball and it turned out to be a goal. Yeah, bit of an analogy.
Marcus, Leo, anything you want to add?
I think the Chelsea game next weekend, obviously massive. Don't get ahead of Chelsea if we do win it, because obviously it looks very good on the table, but nothing can happen. Anything can happen in the future. You still have 25 game weeks left after that. Hopefully we've got Bayern on, I think it's Wednesday night. Hopefully we can see Gyökeres and Odegaard back in the squad. If not, hopefully back in the squad for the Chelsea game. Obviously that'll be a different test to the team, Spurs team we faced yesterday. I feel like obviously they've got to put more of a fight than Spurs did yesterday, and it's obviously at their ground. So that'll be a tricky battle, but I'm looking forward to it. The game on Wednesday night against Bayern Munich, I mean, I think they've won almost every game this season. I think they drew a game the other day or something like that. So it'll be a very interesting test to see how we face up against probably one of the best teams in the world this season, I think, in Bayern Munich. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes.
And Leo, anything to add?
Yeah, like Marcus said, like it's going to be a real. Well, now the test starts this week. I don't want to obviously discredit Tottenham, although arguably they should be discredited.
You can.
Yeah. But in a day we 4-1, massive result. Against we kind of just turned them over. But anyway, it'll be interesting now because you kind of look at Chelsea and Bayern. You're playing two very different teams. You've almost got like Chelsea, the epitome of just pure chaos. You don't know what's going to happen. You can't, pretty much nearly impossible to defend sometimes as well, just because you got wingers like Starvo, Garnacho just running at you all game. Something's going to happen. But going to the bridge for us is massive. Like that, we never really ever get a result there. If anything, rarely. Mainly a lucky draw if we're fortunate. But like we said earlier in the pod, I think to go there and get 3 points is probably maybe, I think, the statement of the season for us. But there's a lot to get right, and I think there's a lot to that we could also get wrong. So yeah, looking forward to it, but hopefully it all plays in our favour.
Absolutely. The time is just 29 minutes past 8, nearly half past. And I think that concludes today's discussion. Next weekend's clash between Arsenal and Chelsea could prove vital for Arteta's side. Can he finally win a trophy after near 700 million being spent during his tenure? Only time will tell. But for this week, it's a goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.